I am convinced that I know what Violet's second signet that she'll get / has already gotten from Andarna is going to turn out to be. Huge spoiler warning. This is speculation, but I'm like 99% sure that this will turn out to be canon, and I will die on this hill. So if you'd rather discover it while reading the books, please turn this off now. Quick disclaimer, I didn't come up with this theory from scratch. I watched the Fantasy Fangirls hour-and-a-half long podcast discussing all of the most popular theories for what her second signet might be, which I'll link to here if you want to watch it. They do discuss what I'd consider to be a partially baked version of this theory, but after all of their debate, neither of them ranked it as their top choice for what they think her second signet will turn out to be. But I think the only reason for that is because the theory hasn't been fully fleshed out, anywhere that I've seen at least. Granted, I'm not on any social media besides YouTube, so that's the only content I've seen discussing it. So apologies if someone else has already put the same idea out on TikTok or somewhere. Alright, so let's get into it. First off, let's start with some of the foreshadowing. In chapter 29 of Fourth Wing, after Violet kills Barlow, she laments, "I had this tiny driving hope that I would be like Brennan, and that would be the twist in my little fable, that my signet would be mending and I could put all the broken things back together, but instead I'm made to split them apart." We'll come back to that in a minute, but there are a couple of other instances of foreshadowing that I want to mention first. In chapter 40 of Iron Flame, Felix tells Violet, "You wield power that takes the form of lightning because that's what you're most comfortable shaping it as." And finally, in chapter 64, Violet says to Andarna, "Your scales aren't really black," and she responds, "No, but he is, and I so badly want to be just like him." So here we go. If Tairn channels Violet pure energy that is made to split things apart, in other words, it's an offensive weapon, then wouldn't it be poetic if Andarna also channeled her pure energy, granting her wish to be like Tairn, but it came from a different source that is life-giving and benevolent? So Violet can use Tairn's signet for destructive purposes and Andarna's signet for constructive purposes, allowing her to put all the broken things back together, which would effectively fulfill the proverb that we get from Andarna that nature likes all things in balance. But what would that source be? Well, dragons and griffins channel to their riders and flyers, but if a human channels directly from the source, then they'll be corrupted and become a venin, and we know that venin channel from the earth. So the only source we know of at this point, and where Tairn is presumably channeling from, is the earth, even though Violet's lightning usually comes from the sky. But we also learned from Felix in chapter 40 of Iron Flame, lightning comes from the sky or the ground depending on the storm, so why not your hands? I think that was a hint that Tairn's power is earth-based. So then why would the Venin quote the fables of the Baron and say that Violet could command the sky to surrender all its power? I think it's going to turn out that the mysterious seventh breed of dragon that Andarna belongs to can channel power from the sun. The sun could be that life-giving source with all sorts of benevolent characteristics to balance out the weaponized, earth-based power she gets from Tairn. And the biggest hint could have been staring us in the face the entire time. Look at the covers. They are giant golden circles with a larger black dragon flying around it, like the Earth orbiting the sun, and a smaller golden dragon centered directly in the middle of the sun. So, what would those benevolent characteristics of this sun-based power be? Apparently, another popular theory for Violet's second signet is amplification. Violet is an extremely altruistic person, as exemplified by her giving Rhiannon one of her own boots at Parapet at the very beginning of the series. So how lovely would it be if one of the things she can do is give some of her power to her friends, amplifying their signets? Rebecca Yarros has said that her second signet has already manifested and it's on the page for us to find. If this is it, then that could explain how Rhiannon is able to summon the dagger through a solid door for the first time, how Riddick is able to put up an entire wall of ice to protect them from dragonfire, how Mira was able to manifest her own ward from scratch outside of the Navarian wards, and maybe even how Xaden reversed his intrinsic signet and pushed his own thoughts into Violet's mind during the throne scene. There's more evidence that could back this up as well. Every time she and Xaden are together in Fourth Wing and the first part of Iron Flame, and he coaxes power from her signet, it's described as power coursing through her. But during that throne scene, which is their first liaison after Andarna is woken up from the dreamless sleep, the quote is, "Power and light course through me." The energy that Tairn provides will usually be referred to as power, and the energy Andarna provides will usually be referred to as light, in contrast to darkness. That also starts getting at the balance between light and dark. The benevolent light fits so well with who Violet is at her core. She abhors killing, going so far as to do things like avoid death blows when fighting back against 6 unbonded cadets that try to murder her in her sleep, saving Jack Barlow by telling people it was oranges that she poisoned him with after he tried to murder her with his venom power, and again breaking down because she manifested such a devastating first signet. This second signet would not only balance out that little bit of darkness in her, but ultimately the ton of darkness in Xaden. He's an exact mirror of her. Despite being a generally good person, he's all about darkness with just a little bit of light. A good metaphor is that he's yin and she's yang, and together they're in perfect balance. Also, maybe that light could be channeled toward any purpose for which benevolent energy would be useful, like helping Violet run faster than she should have been able to back to the ward chamber near the end of Iron Flame. I'm guessing that the eventual extrapolation of this, presumably in the last book, would be that she'll be able to use this energy to heal land that's been drained by the venom, maybe even bringing life and nature's balance back to the entire Barrens. And finally, a natural extension of this could be that she's ultimately able to cure venom, and since signets are supposed to provide something that the writer needs, it would fit with the fact that curing Xaden is arguably her biggest need. That's all I feel particularly sure about. I'll speculate more about things I'm less sure about and what I think all of this implies about the greater arc of the series in a minute, but first let me summarize. Andarna tells us that the first thing dragons learn is that nature likes all things in balance. For that to apply to Violet, it'll turn out that there's the darker, Tarn-like side of her that she got from her mother, Heart of a Rider, which is exemplified by Xaden's nickname for her, Violence. And then there's the benevolent light, Andarna-like side of her that she got from her father, Mind of a Scribe, who presumably gave her her real name, Violet. Okay, so now some really speculative theorizing. Another popular theory for her second signet was that she would have some kind of connection or power related to Malik, the god of death, which could be why Liam was able to speak to her from beyond the grave. Maybe all of that was an hallucination, but later on she addresses Malik directly when she tells him that he can't have Sawyer, as if Malik is a tangible entity rather than just a piece of their vague religion that won't get fleshed out. I do think that the mythology will get fleshed out and the gods will end up playing a more direct role in events. We've already been talking about celestial bodies, the sun and the earth, and a lot of religions and mythology are based on celestial bodies. Both Ares in Greek mythology and Mars in Roman mythology are represented by the planet Mars, and in their respective theologies, each is the god of war. We know that in the religion of this world, there is Dune, the goddess of strength and war. My guess is that she'll be associated with Mars. Zanal, the god of luck, would presumably be associated with another heavenly body like Jupiter, and I think Malik will probably be associated with the barren and lifeless moon. But why would she bother to specify that Amari is the queen of the gods? I'm guessing it's because she'll turn out to be the most powerful and important in the Pantheon. And what is the most powerful and important heavenly body in the solar system? Well, there's a reason they call it the solar system. It's the sun. I think Amari will be associated with the life-giving sun, and the seventh breed of dragon that Andarna belongs to would obviously have some sort of connection to the sun, providing some kind of link between Violet and Amari. And since she'd have this connection with the queen of the gods, that would presumably give her some kind of influence over a lesser god like Malik. People have apparently pointed out that Andarna was still in her dreamless sleep and Violet was under the influence of the signet-blocking serum when Liam came to her, so I don't think this is her signet, but I think it's related. I think, simply because all of this might allow Violet to sway Malik, he allowed Liam to go to her basically using his own power, and perhaps he would end up allowing other people that have passed to speak to her, which could satisfy her need for information and get at that mind of a scribe aspect of who she is at her core. I feel obligated to mention that I think this can lead to some much larger endgame revelations that I am not going to spoil. For me at least, this was a keystone piece of the puzzle, and after thinking about it a lot more, I felt like it implied a lot of things about how the series is going to end. I'm slightly less confident in these predictions, but I still think it's much more likely than not that this gives us a hint about many things, like what other major character will turn venom that I did not see coming, but all of the clues are there for us to find. What characters will be redeemable versus which ones will become true villains, at least a few characters that will survive the endgame, and some that won't. I'll put all of that in a separate video, but I won't make it public until after the series is complete, because it was so satisfying to figure all of this out for myself. I'm sure others can draw the same conclusions once this piece is in place, though, so seriously, beware of those biggest possible spoilers from now on if you want to discover them when they're revealed in the books or get the satisfaction of figuring it out for yourself. But I don't want to be the one that potentially ruins this masterpiece of a series for anyone. By the way, I was able to figure all of this out because I've spent a lot of time trying to put myself into the minds of these characters while writing a fan fiction that retells the events of Fourth Wing from Xaden's point of view. If you'd like to see how I sprinkle more Easter eggs alluding to all of this, along with a lot of other original side story, you can check out an audio version of the first few chapters here on my YouTube channel, or a text version of the first 20 plus chapters so far at Archive of Our Own under my username George R.R. Sagan. There will be a link to it in the video description. Finally, I just want to mention how much I love this story. Even though this stuff was, in the literal denotation of the word predictable, as in I was able to predict it, it definitely wasn't predictable in the colloquial connotation. After putting all the pieces of the puzzle together, I was absolutely shocked to see what the bigger picture was. In my opinion, that's the perfect balance, making it very difficult but technically possible to solve the mystery while still ensuring it's a beautifully crafted surprise when it's revealed. I like fantasy, but as a former physics teacher and a huge science nerd, I'm honestly more of a sci-fi guy at heart, so I do not do it lightly when I say that even though I think Andy Weir's is probably still my favorite overall body of work, the Empyrean is definitely my favorite individual book/series. I haven't been able to stop thinking about the story in the back of my mind since I first read Fourth Wing. I haven't come anywhere close to being this obsessed with something since Harry Potter as a child, and this has surpassed that even despite my being in my 30s now and somewhat jaded. It inspired me to write my first fan fiction, both for its own sake and to hone my writing skills, because it also inspired me to finally go for a lifelong dream I've had of writing my own original work, in hopes that I could create something even half as compelling. So thank you to Rebecca Yarros for all of that.